Officer Greg Anderson has bestowed upon us some more wisdom. I'm not going to pollute his message with any of my thoughts, but I wanted to repost this because this message is important. Make sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Thank you.
Morning, Instagram. So, thinking about the current situation of everything that's going on right now, there's a quote that comes to mind. I think it's very relevant. And that quote was said by Edmund Burke. And that is, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And that quote got me thinking. There's a lot of different aspects of what we're seeing right now that are very applicable to that quote. It makes me think of one of the biggest stains on American history that took place in Vietnam in March of 1968, and that's the My Lai massacre. That mission was a company-sized element of soldiers that were led by absolute inept leadership, and the mission was to go in and kill as many VC fighters as they could. But it was also understood that everybody in the village, man, woman, and child, it was understood that they were to be considered VC fighters. So the leadership on the ground gave everybody the order to shoot on sight. U.S. soldiers went into every house, killing every man, woman, and child, raping young women, bayoneting babies in the back of the head, and so on and so on. And that's, the account of the story are filled with statements such as, I didn't want to do this, I didn't want to follow orders, I wanted to make it stop. And they continued to do it, even though they knew in their hearts that it was wrong. And some of the soldiers' accounts, they talk about bayoneting children with tears running down their face. I mean, imagine that. That's about as heavy as it gets. You're doing something that you morally and ethically, fundamentally stand against, but you're still going through with it. And why is that? That's the question. Why do people do that? And it's interesting how this story ended. It was almost what anyone would guess. It took one person with the moral courage to say, you know what? I can't believe this is happening. And that person was a helicopter pilot. He was above the objective and he could see what was going on. And he connected the dots that this wasn't an enemy engagement, that this was a slaughter. He landed his helicopter. He pointed his machine guns at the U.S. troops and said, this stops now. And he said that he was willing to kill U.S. service members in order to stop the carnage and stop the massacre. He took a hard stand. He called a ceasefire, and as quickly as it began, it ended. And it's estimated they killed up to 400 innocent civilians during that massacre. So why didn't anyone speak up? Why wouldn't anybody else on the ground that felt that they were being put in this terrible moral position, why would they allow for that to continue? And I think that it's a common mentality amongst a lot of people to not want to rock the boat, even if it rises to the level where you're murdering people. Think about that. This story can be seen. Jocko did a podcast on it. It was Jocko Podcast 31. He goes into every detail of the story for like 3 hours. And I highly recommend it because it's very interesting to see how the psyche can get pulled in one direction, even though that's the direction that they know is fundamentally incorrect and morally and ethically wrong. Now, obviously, this story is much more gruesome and much more intense than anything that we're seeing going on in the States. But I can't help but draw a parallel. And that parallel is that we see these things happening with our government and with our police officers. And again, I saw numerous arrests yesterday that were just mind-blowing. I have 2 personal friends that have had their businesses shut down by the police coming in and telling them they can no longer train jiu-jitsu, or they can no longer train CrossFit. And this is how these people, these friends of mine, that's how they feed their children. And I can't help but draw a parallel, because when I talk to officers, I've been in law enforcement for 10 years. I have friends all over the country that are officers, and they literally 100% of them say, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. There's no way I would destroy someone's livelihood or arrest them for exercising any of their freedoms or their liberties. Yet we keep seeing it. And so I would ask officers to do something that we called wargaming in the military. Wargaming is, you think about your mission that's ahead of you. You think about what could go right. You think about what could go wrong. And you come up with different contingencies in your mind based on these different scenarios that may or may not play out. And the whole purpose behind wargaming is to have the mental capacity to face some kind of conflict because you've already went through it before in your mind. So it's not new to you. You're not surprised. You've seen it before. Even though it was in your mind, you've seen it before, and you've come up with solutions. And I would ask officers to do that. Say, what am I going to do if I'm put in this situation? What am I going to do if I'm told to arrest a business owner when that's the only way that he can pay his mortgage? What am I going to do if I'm told to arrest people at the park or break up a protest that is legal? That way, when you're confronted with those situations, you already kind of know where your moral compass is, where your true north is, and where you want to take, where you're willing to take this. Yeah. Again, I want to reiterate, some of my police officer friends are mad at me because they think that I'm giving anti-cop rhetoric, and nothing could be further from the truth. I continue to reiterate that 99% of police officers are good people, and I haven't had any of my friends in law enforcement agreeing with what we're seeing. But I think it's important for the public to know that as well. That's what motivated me to do the first video. I would ask officers, obviously, don't go and make a video in your patrol car while on duty, because we all see how that played out, right? But at least speak up and let the people know. Let the people know that you stand behind them and that you don't think what is happening is moral and ethical and correct. Let the American public know that law enforcement stands with them, not for our mayors and our governors that are drunk on power and forcing families to starve to death. I'm going to put a hashtag on this video, and it's going to be hashtag I stand with the people. I think that could be a movement. Officers nationwide could make a picture, a short video, and just say, I stand with the people. Let that resonate across the country. Show these corrupt politicians that officers and citizens are standing together on this, and we're not going to be pitted against each other anymore. All right, those are my morning thoughts. Thanks for listening, guys.